thank you again for joining us this morning. I know it's a little bit early. Again, I'm Ashley St. John. I'm very happy to be here. And this morning, we're going to be talking about the future of the corporate university. And we have a great group of panelists here to sort of lead the discussion. So to give a little bit of background, the first corporate universities, as you know, date back decades, picking up pace substantially in the late 1980s and into the 1990s. They grew up in a business era that was much more predictable, where companies could more easily define the skills and abilities required of their employees. So how much have the fundamentals driving the need for a corporate learning organization truly changed in the past 30 years? What is the impact of digital on-demand learning? And what roles should the traditional corporate university play, and how should they adapt? So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to our panel. On my left, we have Dr. Kathleen Gallo. She's Senior Vice President and CLO of Northwell Health. Her leadership has seen the creation of Northwell's Corporate University, the Center for Learning and Innovation, and the Patient Safety Institute. And she's a founding dean of the Hofstra Northwell School of Graduate Nursing and Physician Assistant Studies. Kathleen and her team train more than 63,000 professionals from 23 hospitals and more than 600 outpatient facilities in New York State. And then we have Dave Vance, who is Executive Director of the Center for Talent Reporting, as well as former president of Caterpillar University, which he founded in 2001. And Dave also is author of The Business of Learning, How to Manage Corporate Training to Improve Your Bottom Line. Next, we have Daniel Gandaria. He is Vice President and CLO of Texas Health Resources, one of the largest faith-based nonprofit health systems in the United States. He has more than 15 years of experience in learning and education, joining Texas Health in 2012. And he's been involved in a number of strategic projects, including leading the Education Advancement Program, which increases quality and access of education content while decreasing duplication and variation. And last but not least, we have John Palmer, Senior Vice President of Human Resources and Chief Learning Officer for AT&T. And by the way, congratulations to John and his team, who took second place in this year's Learning Elite Awards program.
Great.
So that's very exciting.
Thanks.
John oversees AT&T University, as well as talent acquisition and all learning and development across AT&T. And he served in various roles with them since joining in 1999. So I think we'll go ahead and jump right in. The first sort of way I wanted to kick things off was the traditional model of the corporate university is being questioned in this era. It's a very on-demand, point-of-need content that is very freely available at any place, anytime, to anybody. Do you think it's time to do away with the concept of the university? And Kathy, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. So I think the concept of the corporate university is just that, it's a concept. And whether it's online, digital, certainly in healthcare we have various methodologies of delivering our content, whether simulation or clinical skills centers, et cetera. So I think probably the most important thing for chief learning officers to put on the table when the concept of the corporate university is challenged or questioned is that certainly it needs to be the strategies need to be very aligned with the business that it's there to serve. But as technology evolves, as skills and knowledge change, the corporate university, whatever that looks like, and it might be different to each and every one of us, just needs to evolve with the organization. I wouldn't focus the conversation on that notion of a corporate university, because right away, one big dollar sign shows up in terms of facilities, overhead, faculty, et cetera. I don't think any organization that has any intention of being successful can do without a learning organization. Call it whatever we want. So I would shift the conversation. I think a lot of times the question is just code for, we're taking a look at the budget.
Great. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I'd have to agree with Kathy, I think. I think we should always separate our mission from how we meet that mission. So if the mission is primarily to serve business needs, help your organization address their goals and challenges, then that would be separate from how you do it. So how you do it will evolve, and we know it's evolving at a tremendous speed nowadays, and we should take advantage of everything new that is helpful for us. So personalized learning could certainly be used in service of meeting those business needs. So I would use whatever tools I had at my disposal to meet the needs, but the question of whether the corporate university should continue to exist and what it should do, I think is separate from the modalities of learning or how we meet those needs.
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to hear any disagreement from me up here. I think, the biggest thing that we see is sort of this idea of a corporate university. Everyone has sort of a different mental model for what it would look like at their organization, and that's dependent upon what the organization needs at that time. I think if you were to ask us each what ours looks like, it would be very different. I mean, even from Caterpillar to Northwell to AT&T to what we do at Texas Health, it's all dependent upon what the needs are of the business at the time, and it's adjusted over the course of time. So I think it just has to continue to evolve.
Great.
I think I'll just reiterate the importance of utilization of technology and how we deliver and how we can reach business units and partner with business units, I think is paramount for the future of any L&D organization that's out there. The traditional model of teaching face-to-face curriculums and traveling people all around the country for training, I think is one that's not sustainable for the future as cost structures are going to continue to transform and budgets are going to continue to get pressurized. Then it's going to be imperative for L&D organizations to figure out how to reach learners at scale in a much more efficient and effective way. So I think to the extent that you can virtualize as much as you possibly can with your corporate university, then that will just contribute to the longevity that exists for your team.
Do you think that a change of direction or approach presents certain risks or opportunities?
Well, everything we do is risky. So that's just part of the job. Change, is risky. But all our organizations, as well as yours, I'm sure, are, innovative, and risk is part of that. Failure is part of that as well. That's how you learn and move on. So I think no matter what we do, a risk will come with it. And as chief learning officers, we can't worry about that. There has to be a calculated risk, but certainly we have to take risks just to advance and be innovative. And there's always challenges, so every day, that's just part of the job.
Corporations are increasingly fixated on talent, on driving engagement, culture, and retention. And Dave, I know that you've talked to me about this a little bit. What do you think the corporate university's role is in this environment?
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked that question. Because 12 or 18 months ago, right here on this stage, I began to get worried about the future of the corporate university. And the reason I got worried is because I saw 3 speakers come up to the stage, one after another, and as part of their presentation, they said their mission was employee engagement. I thought, really? Their primary mission, improve employee engagement, one after another. That almost sounded like a trend. An economist 3 in a row, sounded like a trend happening here. And that really began to worry me. And I don't think that should be our primary mission. And it comes out of, in part, all of the changes. So you mentioned the pressures. Certainly we have greater pressures to acquire talent and to retain talent. And higher employee engagement is a great thing and will help do those things. And it will help achieve all of your other goals. So higher employee engagement is wonderful. But people were saying that because that was their primary mission, their learning strategy now would be to curate content to give employees whatever they wanted, when they wanted, and how they wanted. And some even said in breakout sessions their new learning strategy was to send surveys out to the employees, try to find out what they want, and then give them what they want. To me, this was a return to the totally reactive market for us. Instead of in the old days, it was the business units we thought we were taking orders from. Now you're going to take orders from your employees. But what really worries me is if that's the direction you're going, it's all about content curation to serve the employees. If that's the direction you're going, the economist in me says, I think what's going to happen, if that's the direction you go, is there are going to be firms coming in a couple of years which are super aggregators of content. And they will do a better job than you ever can in aggregating all of this general learning content that you were thinking of giving to your employees for employee engagement. We're not talking about business-specific content now, but just kind of general learning that's of interest to employees. So why wouldn't there emerge kind of the Amazons, the Googles of general content? And if you can imagine a company like Google, just some large company, they will do this at scale. And they will have more content than you could ever find on the outside or inside. They will curate it. And because they're at scale, the cost will go approaching zero. It will be very, very cheap. So they will have more content than you could ever have yourself. You will be able to buy it for your employees from them far below the cost that you could do this yourself. So if that was your only mission, and I was the CFO in your company, I'm saying, why do I need you?
That's right.
Why? I just get rid of you. To me, if you go that route, that will be the end of the corporate university. The corporate university will become extinct. And in 10 or 15 years will not exist if that is the direction we go. If we focus primarily or solely on employee engagement, and we're going to meet that need through curated content, we will be out of business. Because there'll be others that can do that cheaper, better, at greater scale than you ever can. So that's what got me thinking about the future of the corporate university. So my hope is that we don't do that. That is not your mission. That was not what you have in your mission statement right now. That it's not just about employee engagement. That, as I think we all just said, your primary mission should be to address your business needs, your business challenges. And most of our CEOs don't have employee engagement as their number one business goal.
Right.
In other words, we'd hope that you first meet the business goals rather than the HR goals. It's not the HR goals aren't important. Employee engagement and leadership are very important, and we can help and have a big impact. But I think in most organizations, that's not why you were created. That shouldn't be your mission. And bad things are going to happen if you take your eyes off the business reason for your existence.
100% agree.
So, he's not passionate about this.
I think that, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so to hopefully you'll feel a little bit better. Our purpose at Texas Health Resources University is to maximize the performance and potential of our people. That's what we got approved. That's what we went through a visioning team to come up with. And we know that that's in service of our broader mission, which is to improve the health of the people in the communities we serve. So we've linked the two, and we really try to target whatever the key performance indicators are for our organization. And to stick to that, right? There's always things that will come up that you have to kind of juggle around. But yeah, we've sort of entered into an engagement strategy, but more around how do we maintain this gig worker and to get all of our employees engaged. So we've really looked at the university as both the organization and vice versa. So we're tapping into individuals who want to retire, who maybe want a second job that are really experts, and we've created a gig role where they're adjunct faculty for the organization, and they float their time to us, and then we can use them to teach subjects. It also helps us move to scale when we need a large training program. So we're basically 6 months into that strategy, so I can't really talk too much about how successful we've been, other than we've got about 12 recruits at this point, and we should be at 50 by the end of the year. So
That's great. So I don't think that there's a difference between a learning strategy and employee engagement strategy. If we all believe that the future of all of our lives is to be engaged in continuous learning because of the advancements of technologies and how things are going to change, then the days of I'm going to training today or this week or next month are over, because you should have training integrated into your employees' lives every single day, which means inherently you are going to influence employee engagement positively or negatively based on how you're performing and executing as a corporate university. So I think 5, 10, 15 years ago, employee engagement and training were two separate conversations. I think today, and especially in the future, they're both going to be one and the same if we're doing this right. And I would say that a good benchmark for all of us, and it's one that we use with our corporate university at AT&T, is that if there is separate conversations about employee engagement where training is not integrated, then we're not doing our job effectively, because it should all be one and the same. And at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to drive the best corporate university. It's going to drive the best overall structure for employees, and it's going to drive engagement inevitably.
So I think employee engagement is one of the outcomes of the learning strategy. And I very strongly agree with you on this point, because if in fact your corporate university or whatever learning structure you have is seen by the organization as just moving the employee engagement numbers, I think it's dangerous. And another 5, 6, 7 years, it'll be something else out there, and that everybody will be shifting to. So I would keep the learning strategy at the forefront, connected to the business goals and objectives. And if the employees are being enriched by their skill set, mastering skills, attitudes, it's affecting culture, engagement is an outcome of that. And I'm sure many of you have high potential programs. We have executive development programs. Employees are very engaged when they move through those programs, and they receive promotions, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an outcome, but I wouldn't have it on the mission statement.
Great. This next question I found interesting. With some exceptions, corporate universities are moving away from a physical campus and a physical space. But what part do you think having a physical space plays, and why bring people together still, or why isn't it important to do so? Did you want to start, Dan? Or Kathy?
Yeah, I think, and I'll talk about healthcare. The issues around healthcare in terms of patient safety, right? Healthcare is very similar to aviation in terms of outcomes. We're all going to get on a plane probably today, and we'd like to get off the plane, and we probably all will. If anybody or family member is going into a hospital or an ambulatory center for a procedure, they want to get in, they want to get out, they want to feel better after they get out. There's a lot of complexity to get the plane up, get the plane out, get the patient in, and get the patient out. And so team training, both in healthcare and aviation, is central to patient safety, as well as having that interprofessional team. In schools, in professional schools, everybody learns in a silo. And then they show up at work, and they don't know how to work together, and that is deadly. And there's plenty of evidence that that is deadly. So we, at our Center for Learning and Innovation, have a significantly large interprofessional simulation center just for those team training sessions. We have over 115 clinical teams regularly scheduled. Nobody comes once. Each program is different. Cardiac surgery is different from emergency medicine, et cetera. And we will always have that. Now, there are other, the acquisition of knowledge is all pre-work. What we focus on, whether it's executive development or team training or any kind of clinical program, is we want to see the application of that knowledge. We no longer, like we did in the past, have somebody stand in front and lecture. We know lectures don't cut it anymore. So we trust the employees to do their pre-work, and when they come in, it's all about application, appropriate assessment methods. Assessment methods are different for each delivery model. Reflection, debriefing around how the team worked, et cetera, et cetera. The other advantage, we think that, and we don't bring people in as often as we did in the past. We have 21 hospitals and close to 500 ambulatory centers. We mix and match everybody when they come. So it is, one big networking event aside of all the content. I always say, all those props are just for culture change. So we find that it's very necessary for relationship building among campuses, among the different hospitals.
Dave? What do you think, Dave?
I think if you're talking about bringing people together, it is important for relationships. So maybe in a leadership training program, you want the cohort to bond because you want them to continue that relationship afterwards or maybe through an extended leadership training. And then it would make sense. But you could bring them together anywhere around the country or anywhere around the world, so it wouldn't have to be at a corporate headquarters location. When we started Capital University, we thought a lot about that, whether we wanted kind of a central area. Now, I would have loved one. It would have been good for the ego to have a great big building with Caterpillar University on it. You come into work every day, and that would have been very nice. I've seen others, and they're great. But I know when we set up CATU that there was a lot of skepticism whether we would truly be a global corporate university or we would be purely or US-centric. So sometimes if you're part of an international organization, when headquarters says it's going to do something, there's question about whether you're really a global company or you're a US company with manufacturing and sales abroad. So is it going to be very US-centric, or are you really going to try to be more global? So if we were to have built a Caterpillar University building and put it in the United States, that would simply have reinforced in everyone's mind that we weren't yet a truly global company because we kept doing everything that was important in the US. But to put it outside, just to put it outside, when most of our employees were in the US, that wouldn't seem to make a lot of sense. So we had offices around the world, but no one big structure. So we had an office in Geneva, in Miami to cover Latin America, and Beijing and Singapore. So we had offices around the world, like you could do around the country if the country were your area. But we didn't go with the one facility. It would have cost money. Don't know if we would have gotten the money or not. But that combined with, I don't think as we move towards the future, you need as much space to bring people together when you're going to have all the travel costs involved, when there are so many other options growing better all the time with virtual instruction and e-learning, that you don't need that anymore. And we would just rent space wherever around the world we needed it when we needed to bring people together. So we never built the building.
Yeah, I go back and forth. I don't think you need it, and I think it all depends on the context and the environment in which you're working. So primarily, we're in North Texas. DFW is a pretty big metroplex, but it's pretty easy to have a space and to bring people together to drive there within an hour to be there. I think there's different contexts and different environments. I agree with what Kathy said. Interprofessional within healthcare, everyone is trained in a silo, and you need to bring people together to understand the roles and responsibilities when you're providing care between the physician and the nurse and the physical therapist and the PCT, and what's everyone going to do and what's their role and responsibility. Because they're trained so independently, they might not know the extent to which the other needs to act in a situation, and that can cause patient harm. So that's one reason why you would want to have a physical location, but that might just be for a program, and you might not need a larger campus. We did make a run at it, and of course we're not for profit, so we came up with this plan where we were going to go to our foundation and we were going to ask for a lot of money, and we were out there and we're like, what can we slap names on, and will they give money? This can be this room, just like a typical university, and they can have the elevator, and they can have the, you name whatever it is, right? They can be the door. We don't care what it is, just name it and find donors. And when we came back with what it was going to take, it was a $7 million investment to redo part of this this floor that's in one of our pavilions. And so we did get it approved to move forward with phase 1, which was a chunk of that. And so we're living in this sort of, we've got half of it built out. And I think we're running out of space, but we're going to sustain and we're going to use other space as necessary. So yeah, I could talk out of both sides of my mouth on this. I think ultimately it probably depends on what your nature of business is and where you are and what you need at that time.
We've got a big path to virtualization at AT&T, and we're doing a lot of trials and testing to see, can we virtualize this curriculum and that curriculum? And so far, what we found over the last year and a half, where we've really been pushing this pretty hard inside our company, is that there's not a lot that you can't actually virtualize. And totally agree, healthcare, different ballgame. A lot of the safety curriculums that we have for our technicians, we're not really comfortable trialing virtualization there just because it impacts people's lives. But when you think about customer service, when you think about sales, there's a lot of conversations that happen inside our company about you really can't virtualize that. You need to be able to look people in the eye when you're training sales, when you're training customer service. And so our path is to just trial and take new hire in-person training, take new hire virtual training, run them at the same time in the same regions and very similar locations. And what we found is in almost every single trial, virtualization is as effective or more effective. And when you ask the students who have gone through the virtualized training, and when you ask the students who've gone through the in-face training, the people that we're hiring now as they're coming out of college, as we're looking at more millennials, it's more natural for them to learn virtually because that's how they've consumed the majority of their content as they've grown up. So I think that we're going to continue to push the lines here as far as we possibly can, just because the benefits are so great. I mean, we have the ability to train thousands and thousands of people around the globe in a week, when in the past, if we were going to put conferences together and travel everybody in and out, it would take months, not to mention it would take a lot of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we can actually take a moment and see if there are any questions from anyone in the audience. I know we have a couple of mics out there, so if anyone has a question, we would love to hear it.
Ashley, we're over here on this side of the room. We've got one.
Great.
And if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself as well.
Thad Call, Union Pacific Railroad. For the gentleman from AT&T, on that virtualization, just a follow-up question. How did that work for your technical training, especially for technical hands-on training, where hands-on is a big component of that?
Yeah, so that's one of the places that we're really going into this year to see. And I think that what we're working on is utilizing virtual reality and augmented reality, because there are things that you have to be able to see and you have to be able to somewhat experience. I'll give you an example. One of the things that my team just took me through is we did a virtual reality curriculum in manhole training. So I've never been in a manhole until my team took me through it virtually. And yes, you can't smell it, you can't feel the dampness, but you do now have the full-blown experience of being inside a manhole, and it is very scalable. So in the past, how it would work is when we had a new hire class or some sort of curriculum that dealt with the manhole, you would have a class of 12 or 15 technicians, and today would be the manhole day, right? You'd caravan the class out to the manhole, everybody gets 15, 30 minutes in the manhole, while the other 11 or 14 people are just standing around pretty much doing nothing, right? So your utilization, your efficiency and effectiveness is not that great. I can probably train 80% plus of what they're going to learn in that physical manhole curriculum virtually. And I think that's really where we're really excited about the more hands-on technical training, is utilizing that type of technology to deliver it.
There's a question over there, Ashley.
Oh, great.
Hi, Kim Ryman from Rust-Oleum Corporation. The last sentence that you made a comment about is sales and customer service being trained virtually. Big push in our organization. Our global footprint is moving faster than we can put shoes on it sometimes. So I'm really interested. And then I thought, well, you're from AT&T, so maybe this is a silly question, but what is a platform that you use to really secure good virtual learning or live webinar? I'd like more interest on what is the infrastructure platform that you're using to reach that way. Did I ask that clear enough, maybe?
So we've built it ourselves, and it's called, what we call it, Interactive Virtual Learning Studios. And so we've got, it's technical directors, it's literally a production studio, very low grade. I'm not going to say it's a movie studio, but our instructors are in front of a green screen, so we have the ability to put whatever content is behind them, very interactive. We've got a technical director that's sort of managing the entire production so that they are able to tell the instructor as they're training, hey, that class in Chicago or that person in Miami looks like they're overlapping, you should call on them. So then the instructor has the ability to engage the class randomly, just like you would in a face-to-face environment, and you have the ability to train hundreds of people at a time because you do have that technical director that's very focused on the engagement of the class and how they're receiving the different points that the instructor's making throughout the curriculum, so then the instructor can do whatever that technical director is really kind of telling them needs to be done to make it a very effective learning environment. We've also got a MOOC platform that we built, and that's something that I think is really interesting because the ability to put curriculums on a MOOC platform so that it's this complete online learning experience is really, I think, going to be something that will help us understand why virtualization is possible because of the social element that exists. So when we have put curriculums on a learning platform, what we find is that people have the ability to engage socially, and sometimes, or what we found is those social engagements tend to have a lot longer relationship history than what would happen at a traditional conference, right? I mean, sure this doesn't happen in your experiences, but sometimes at AT&T, you have a conference, you make all these promises, you make all these, contacts, and I'm going to call you, and we're going to work this out, and then it never happens. What we're seeing with our MOOC platform is that these social engagements tend to spark, and it's easier to continue to let those cultivate with one another, and you're getting a really good dividend off that platform and off that modality of training because the relationships seem to be a little bit deeper and a little bit more productive than in the traditional face-to-face environments.
Interesting.
Any other questions?
We have one right here in the middle.
Hi there, Andrew Teasdale from United Health Group. Could you talk a little bit about the relationship that you have with public and private universities, how you might be leveraging them to help prepare potential employees before they ever come to your company? And then are you doing things with them, have relationships with them for training people once they are at your company? And then how do you see that kind of evolving and changing in the future?
Do you want to answer first?
I'll start. Yes. So a couple of things we have learned over the past. So we have over 15,000 nurses. I'll stick to nursing for the moment. And so you can imagine the amount of nurses that we hire every year. We have, with the baccalaureate nurses that are graduating and going into our specialty units, critical care, emergency, pediatrics, ICU, et cetera, et cetera. Because the universities cannot change quickly with the environment, we actually have fellowships. We give them the 5th year of nursing school because you can't graduate on Sunday and come to work in our ICU on Monday. There's such a gap between what the competencies are when they come out of school versus what we need now for the graduate to perform. So we have a number of fellowships for the baccalaureate nurses to come out. So they're over a year long. And so one of the reasons that we've partnered with Hofstra University, we created a medical school as well as a graduate nursing school. One, we're graduating nurse practitioners. May will be our first inaugural class out. And our medical school, we began in 2008 with Hofstra. So our CEO had decided that he will partner with Hofstra so that we can actually create our own pipeline. Now, we do also have other schools involved, and we hire from. But even on the administrative side, we have administrative fellowship programs. You know, in the past, organizations would turn to universities to, you know, acquire the knowledge and move it into the organization, and I think it's a completely flipped model now. Mm-hmm. The environment is changing so quickly that the schools can't keep up. And it's just a completely opposite model now, where we'll partner with schools to create our own pipeline. Now, we work with the engineering school. Of course, they can certainly add something. We're doing a lot with 3D printing models for our surgical residents to practice on, et cetera. But for the most part, we are filling the gap in our corporate university that the graduates have in their knowledge to come on board.
Yeah, this became such a large issue for us that in 2016, we created our own service line within our university for academic partnerships because we have 26,000 employees and we have well over 4,000 students that come through the doors. In our largest hospital, we have, I think, 786 beds and we have 785 students. And that includes not just higher education, but as many of you probably know, secondary education, and when students graduate from high school now, in Texas at least, they have to have a specialization. And so you either have to, schools are getting evaluated for high schools on whether they're in school districts and whether they're able to sending people to college, the military, or right into the workforce. So there's all these certifications that are popping up. So we're seeing this influx of students coming in to be pharmacy techs or to be CNAs or certified nursing assistants and wanting to be PCTs and support the nurses. So we've really focused on this because it's just such a high volume activity. We do bring them in. We help support them in their rotation at the facility where they're doing clinical training with a preceptor. And then afterwards, when they come into the same thing, for our nursing students, they're not prepared when they start. So we have a residency program for them, and we run that, and we run a transition program as well at the same time to allow people to move into a new specialty. But it takes a lot of time and effort. So to that point, we actually took a page out of AT&T's playbook, and we looked at how they're doing the sort of the future skills and competencies, and we went through with our nursing job family, and started to map out what the competencies are that we want so we can move upstream and start going to our academic partners and saying, if you can produce this, we want to partner with you. If you can't produce this, we can find somebody who will. Right. That way we'll be able to bring them in and cut that cost that we're spending on preparing them. So it's a different model, and I think it scares, some of our partners. So we're really looking for academic partners that want to be a partner.
Was there
There's
maybe
one in the
one
middle,
more?
one back there.
Oh.
Hi, thank you guys so much for being part of the panel. My name is Lowell Durango with Blizzard Entertainment. So this question's kind of regarding the virtual reality, the VR type training, which I think is fascinating. I'm just curious though, post-training, once it's all completed, once it's all said and done and they're in the workforce and they're doing their day-to-day work, what is the link between what it is that they've been trained from a VR perspective to now the actual, not just application, but the continuous development of the individual? Is it their direct manager, their direct leader, that's the one who's providing the coaching and feedback? And if so, is it linked back to the actual training they received in VR?
So VR specifically, we're pretty young. We've got about 20-ish curriculums that we're putting folks through. We have not seen a full boomerang effect from you go through that VR training, you go back in, apply, and then somehow it's linked back to that initial curriculum there. We don't have that loop completed yet, but in general, then I think where VR will have a play for us is that it's a really nice complement and it's a really nice balance to drive efficiency and effectiveness into your processes. I don't think that it's a zero sum. You can absolutely do all this technical training in this virtual environment, and then, as an example for us, you can't climb a pole virtually and then just go and jump up a pole, right? You have to have some hands-on instruction where you understand exactly your footings and how to do it when you're going to be 10, 15 feet in the air. But you can introduce the concept, and you can make sure that where you may have taken 15 technicians out for an entire day, and they're really utilized from a training perspective for about 30 minutes. Now you can probably take them out there for 2 hours because you've done all of that upfront work and all of that upfront experience. I think that as technologies continue to advance and evolve in this space of virtual reality and augmented reality, specifically compression technologies, so that you've got the ability to send out much more sophisticated and much more elegant solutions out at scale, that's really where we'll see the explosion of this modality in corporate learning, because the ability right now for people in an augmented space, you have to be tethered to a CPU. Typically, the hardware is very expensive, and I think that all of that technology needs to become a little bit more affordable for people to be able to actually execute this at scale in a corporate L&D environment.
If I could just add to that, similar, we've just stepped foot into virtual reality. Yeah. And similar to your technician in the manhole, we put our clinicians in what we call the room of horrors. And so it's a patient room that is just loaded with safety traps. Mm-hmm. And as they walk through, we have 20 clinical cases that we developed. As they walk through that, they have to identify the safety traps. And it starts with the report they're getting from the clinician going off. And at the end, they get an immediate assessment, and the faculty can see exactly, where the gaps in knowledge are, or, where the clinician did very well. And then over time, we identify, is there a consistent gap that we have to now spiral back into the curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's a nice adjunct, right? So it's like pre-work, et cetera, and then we take them and put them in a real simulation to see if they can actually perform at the same level. So I think it has a great future. Mm-hmm. It takes something to create a virtual reality a case, but certainly I would encourage everybody, if you get the opportunity, to experiment with it. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Looks like there's a question on the side over there.
Oh, okay.
Ashley, if you want to take one more.
Since we're talking a little bit about technology, I'd also like to ask the question on where you guys all stand when it comes to wearable tech and how it might inform training a little bit more, especially in regards to safety. I work for, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself, Patty Scaramuzzo, work for PPL Electric Utilities, and we're trying to look at just-in-time training to be able to answer the question of the speed of technology, as well as wearable tech to try and embed safety in people's minds while they're being trained.
Wearable tech.
So I think, so for us, we and our executive team, we have a cabinet that we put together that has some of our senior leaders on it to help us think through how we move forward and prioritize, and the notion, and we're all on the same page, that someday, right, we're all going to have, I don't know whether it's Google Glass or we're going to have some ability to recall information right there and to be able to say, okay, I can't remember how to do that. That's right, I've done that before and I know how to do it. Everyone's on board with it. I think moving in that direction is costly right now. Now there's some other things that you can probably do, like wearables. I mean, I don't know if you like smartwatches and other things that can remind you that, but I think translating that information to a device is something we're not good at just yet, because a lot of times it involves translating whatever you would do in a different way to that form. So we're on board with the vision. We're just not there yet because of the cost, and it just would take a lot for us to be able to do that at this point.
I think the ability to automate as much as you possibly can when traditionally you would have human intervention is really important. And that doesn't necessarily mean displacement of jobs in our mind. It means that the people are just going to be doing different, more efficient, more effective work. So take the example of if you have people that are going up to a customer's residence, or if you have any sort of situation where your employee has a key KPI that they're being measured on. In the past, it would take a manager, a supervisor, an organization to identify a training need that's out there. Now you can actually automate, create bots to say, hey, when this KPI threshold is not met, then automatically send this type of curriculum over to that individual so that they can then go engage in it. And what that means from an L&D perspective, though, is that your curriculums have to be short bite curriculums. They can't be the traditional hour-and-a-half long PowerPoint presentations that's out there. So your design team will have to have a significant hand in transforming the curriculums that you've got so that you can take these micro learnings and just automatically ship them out to your employees when there is an automated identified need. But I think the ability to use technology in that way is really exciting, and I think it also just reinforces that culture of continuous learning and strategy when you're aligned with the business and the KPIs, and you align with the business to say, when this KPI is not met, you ship this training to these individuals, and then you can use data analytics to track the performance post that training actually being shipped out there. I think that's pretty powerful.
My next question, and we should have time for another question or two at the end, if there are any additional ones, is what do you think the future holds for the corporate university? And we've sort of touched on that already, but how do you think it will be different in 5 years, 10 years?
I think it'll be as different as the industries that they serve, if they're going to be around. I think we've all made the point a number of times that we're here because the business is here. And that unless we are completely aligned with that business, there's no point in even having a corporate university. I also think, and this is a bias of mine because I came from operations, that for those learning leaders that are professional learning leaders, I am not a professional learning leader because I came from operations, is to know the business well, to understand exactly what the product or service is that the organization is delivering, and also to be very connected to the culture of the organization. I have seen some colleagues that work very much in a silo. The corporate universities here, strategies are being created. I've seen this in HR organizations as well. And I'm like, hey, why don't you go over and see what the staff is doing in the emergency department at midnight before you create this great strategy for the managers? So it's very important, I think, to be very connected to those that are the boundary employee delivering the service and the product, and to get input and feedback.
I'm curious, is anyone up here, any of your organizations, are you making specific changes that you'd like to talk about right now to prepare for the future of the corporate university?
So we have a whole, actually the CEO has put a number of groups together. We're thinking 5 to 10 years out. And so one of those groups is around our learning function. And so we have all the stakeholders involved, the executives are very much involved. The senior executives are very much involved in our corporate university. Just to think about, we can try to predict where healthcare is going, which is pretty much impossible, but to identify in terms of the new technology, how can we enable what we do with new technology? We always know the content, the skills are going to change. That's almost the easiest thing to figure out, at least that's been my experience. But the delivery methods will vary. Assessment methods have to match with the delivery methods. Not only do we create a learning environment for our employees, be it in person or off campus, we always want to assess that knowledge in action somehow. And not just, have it one way. We want to make sure that that knowledge is actually translated into performance when they're at work. So this group coming together, and we'll be reporting out actually to the CEO sometime in the summer what our Center for Learning and Innovation will look like going forward.
Is there anything that we should stop doing? And Daniel and Dave, I know we talked about that briefly in your interviews a couple of days ago. Is there anything that as a corporate university we should stop doing or start doing?
Well, I think that in part depends on where you are today. If you find yourself still largely an order taker, please stop doing that. So whether it's from business units or departments or employees, don't be an order taker. So have a strategy, a very forward-looking strategy, using all the technology. So align very closely with the business. So if that's what you're doing, stop doing that. And if I could turn that around, maybe something to start doing if you're not, is I would encourage everyone to have very strong governance. So if you don't have a governing body composed of senior leaders, this can be very helpful to ensure that you are aligned to the business, as we all agree is important, and to manage the transitions and changes which you know are coming with the future. And I was a little skeptical. I didn't establish it until the second year of CAT-U because I guess I was personally, I felt a little uncomfortable since I wasn't a learning professional myself. But I should have just gone ahead. They knew I didn't know what I was doing when they put me in the position, so I should have just gone ahead to begin with and established the governing board. But it was chaired by our CEO and had direct reports to the CEO on it. And that governing board was invaluable. And they wanted to meet 3 hours every quarter. And it was absolutely invaluable to me to get their advice, their input into the business plan for learning. They were always there to help you overcome obstacles. They were your partner. A great way to cement that relationship as a valued business partner. So if that's kind of been on your list and you don't have it yet, I think that's one of the hallmarks of a corporate university. In Jeannie Meister's 1998 book, that was one of the identifying characteristics of a corporate university, is you would have strong senior level governance for the corporate university as a differentiator from the old training departments. So if you don't have that, then that'd be very helpful. And just one more reason to have that is that next July, we will tie the longest expansion on record for the US economy. So I can't help but think a little bit about economics. So we will then be in uncharted territory. We have data going back 200 years. So we will be in uncharted territory. In other words, the clock is ticking and the next recession is coming. Economists always like giving good news to people. So there is a recession out there on the horizon. They're impossible to predict. You can't say for sure when it'll start or what the trigger mechanism will be. Personally, I would pencil in 2020 or 2021 as when the next recession will start. But the good news is that you've got a couple of years yet to make sure you're as ready as you can be when the next recession hits, because you know what's going to happen. The pressure to cut costs across your organization will be intense. And historically, learning in HR is cut disproportionately, and in part because they don't see the value in what you do, or you're not as strong a business partner as you could be. So the bad news is there is a recession coming sometime. The good news is it probably won't start tomorrow, and you've got a couple of years to get your department ready for it. So I told you so. Just don't hold me to a date, but there's one coming, which is a safe prediction.
That's funny. So for us, I think, I'll just tell you, so we've been working on our strategy, and that's part of what we were focused on. The university is a response to the change in the healthcare environment. And we had 4 key things that our senior leaders definitely wanted to see. One is a governance and approval process for how we're going to move forward with new projects and programs. So that's been really helpful. As a part of that, we got integrated into the business, which was another aspect that we had looked at. And so we have these operations innovation teams, and they've plugged us in so that as we're making changes, we're actively involved, so we understand what's going on. And allied health disciplines, nursing disciplines, department changes, whatever it is, we're actively involved now and engaged in those conversations. And things from there still have to go up to our cabinet to be approved, depending upon what the change is. So integration is critical because that will help to shore up any, I mean, if the business is asking for it, we'll find money to be able to support it, right? So it's a different approach. Another is, again, moving things. I talked about this gig workforce that we're trying to build up with our sort of subject matter experts as teachers. It's really a broader strategy around moving to variable cost on things that we don't own, right? So if we own the orientation, so we staff that cost. Anything else above and beyond that, we move to a variable cost where it's consumption-based or based on what we need. So that's a key strategy so we can basically just streamline, here's what we have to do, the rest becomes variable, and our CFO obviously really likes that approach because then we don't pay for something just to sit there, right? And I think that John's touched on with efficiency and effectiveness. So that's really a strategy to get down to that variable cost. So that's something I would, not just understanding the business, but understanding business of running your own department and what that would mean and how that would match up with what the expectations are, both financially and for your outcomes you're trying to provide.
Great, thank you. Well, just to sort of start wrapping up, what would you each offer as a sort of final piece of advice as people start thinking about how to structure their learning organizations going forward?
My final advice would be to think about how you can integrate technology with your L&D organization. Over the last couple of years, as we've backfilled different positions and as we've staffed jobs at our corporate university, we've tried to bring a lot of technologists into our team, coders and people who understand automation and people who understand media and the digital media so that we can start to create those short form videos so that you can really just have a full integration of L&D into your employees' lives. I always like to talk to my team about how do you consume content, entertainment, news, sports. Probably everybody has maybe even checked their news feed while this panel's been going on, right? Because you have the ability to look at large amounts of information in a very short amount of time. Utopia for us at AT&T would be to be able to have that type of learning culture and to be able to deliver learning in that way where someone can pick up their phone and just pull up the TU app and see all of the things that are customized for them based on the jobs that they want to do, based on the job that they are doing, or the competencies that they want to build. So the more you can think about technology and bring technology into your team via skill sets, I think is really important as you're structuring your university.
I would also add to that there's some type of analytics so you can monitor the outcomes. And it's always beneficial to share with whoever your leadership is the outcomes that are occurring day in and day out, annually, et cetera, and of course always connected to the business. But a report card is always good to have on hand. It also keeps the alignment tight.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing that we did is we got everyone involved in helping us to identify what we wanted. So I think that's pretty key, making sure you touch base with everyone that's a key stakeholder, and then really clearly articulating what are the products and services that you will provide and to whom, because that clarifies a lot. So we're still going through an exercise of cleaning up what are the products and services, and if it's not in there, then that's not what we provide. Now we can help, but it's a different story in that case.
And how about you, Dave?
I would say just stay focused on your mission, which hopefully is aligned to the business, and if not, that's an opportunity to become more closely aligned to the business, and achieve the right balance in your own organization. We hear a lot about learner-centric is the future, business-centric was the past. That's incorrect. You should always have a business-centric focus for the business goals, and sometimes business does know best. I wouldn't move to a world where employees get to decide what they want to take, when they want to take it for everything, because you have very successful people in your organization performing jobs, and why would you want new people coming in have to learn everything from scratch? Why wouldn't you convey to them from a business-centric approach that which you know they need to know and get them up to speed as quickly as possible on it. So business-centric shouldn't be a dirty word. It should balance with learner-centric. And if learner-centric means taking advantage of all the new personalized learning opportunities, then of course do that in everything you're doing. If learner-centric means employee-directed is great for general studies, what employees want to learn just to satisfy their own interests or perhaps prepare for the next job. That's great, but don't let that displace the business-centric direction so you're sure they have the skills that you know they need for the jobs they have to do. So a balance, I think, is where we want to be.
Great. We may have time for one question if anyone has one. Any questions? Oh, I think we have one.
There you go. Okay, right there in the middle. Oh, you don't have a mic. Okay.
Globalization. So I'm curious around strategies that you may have used as you virtualize to address employee resistance to virtual learning, and particularly, I get a lot of, well, that kind of stuff will work in North America, but that won't work in this part of the world, whatever, India or somewhere like that. I get that resistance quite a bit. So I'm curious if you've met that resistance and if you have any suggestions.
Yeah, so I think you've got to be really sensitive to all the different cultures and learning styles that are out there around the globe. It certainly is something that you need to address and you need to be open to thinking about. And what we found is the ability to just have a really close tie to those business units out there. So we're not forcing any learning, we're partnering with each business unit. And most of the different organizations around the globe that we serve have pretty specific needs. And so we are just in lockstep with them from a partnership perspective and a strategy standpoint so that we can really understand their needs on how they can most effectively execute and we can ultimately most effectively execute for them. We did do our corporate-wide leadership development program for the first time last year. So this is a 10-year program that we've had at AT&T, and what we had done in the past is fly our L&D team all around the globe. We would do somewhere in the range of 20 conferences in about a 4-month time span, and we would fly all of our general managers into these central hubs, and we'd have these great curriculums. Well, last year, we decided that we would have to kind of take our own medicine and see if we can take our flagship leadership development training program and execute it virtually, globally. And we did it. And we had pretty tremendous success. Each different country actually had different hubs that were created from a watch party perspective, or if they just wanted to have some sort of social network that was out there. And it was really interesting to see around the globe how people did things very differently, yet at the end of the day, they were still able to receive and consume the same curriculum that we launched in 3 days versus a 4-month time span.
Well, I think we're out of time. Thank you all so much for being here today, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their symposium and safe travels home today.
Thanks.
Thank you.